Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Thank you for joining us. Hello, America. Welcome to episode 58. Thanks for sticking with me. So, what are we talking about today? Well, incompatible values. We're going to look, and it's going to be an objective look. I know it's not going to sound that way at times, but it's going to be objective. About immigration. We're looking at immigration and the potential future, folks. And we're going to, in politics, especially when it comes to economics and, well, war and other things, the left side of the aisle loves to do direct comparisons to European countries and Scandinavian countries. But when it comes to what we're talking about today, they don't want to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at crime statistics involving air fingers, quotes, asylum seekers and immigrants from Muslim majority countries in Europe and Scandinavia. And all the sources I'm looking at, these are all official government sources from each of their governments. And we're looking at like Germany and Sweden and Denmark, places like that. So if we take a hard look at Europe, we have to consider what does that look like America's future, right? Is what's going on in Europe now. Because look, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when they decided to throw open all borders in Europe, well, I hate to say conservatives, but I mean, rational humans said, hey, this is going to be a problem for you. And we're called racists and xenophobes and whatnot. Well, it's become a problem, hasn't it? Just because it didn't become a problem 2 months later, because maybe that's about the not even 2-month attention span in the political world today. Yeah, when they threw borders open, smart people said, look, that's going to be a problem for you. You need to reconsider. Well, now they're doing all these extreme things. Well, let's get to it. We'll get to it. And we're going to look at how could that happen in America. We're going to look at some of the variables, like our very generous welfare system and the way politics and political sway shifts in America. That is a variable. And then the biggest thing is the fundamental differences in value systems. All right, so let's look at Germany real quick. Non-Germans, which mostly Muslim, and it does, from whatever countries, right? I'm saying Muslim from different countries. They make up about 15% of the population and account for about 43% of violent crimes. And that's not including immigration crimes or just illegal immigration. That's actually, violent crimes. Well, that's a disparity, isn't it? Now, I picked on the black community with the when we talked about gun violence in America, and now I'm kind of picking on the Muslim community. And I'm saying Muslim, like that's a vast community, folks, vast throughout the world, but ever growing in Europe, like rapidly growing in Europe. Again, Airfinger quote, asylum seekers. Now, look, I'm not crapping on asylum seekers either, folks. There are legitimate asylum seekers who are trying to escape war-torn, not getting bombed. I get it. I get that. But whether you mean to immigrate to escape violence or you mean to immigrate just to find a better life, there has to be a level of assimilation. There has to be. Anyway, back to Germany. Migrants from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, across North Africa, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. That they represent a large, 43% of the crime. Why is that? Why is that? And specifically, Germany even narrowed it down more. Young men, and I'm going to translate young men into military age males. That's somewhere from about 18 to like 40 something. From Syria and Afghanistan commit the most 10 to 16 times higher than a German citizen. And similar numbers of that from North African nations. Yeah. Why is that? Is it because Germany's racist and they target these people to set them up for false allegations? Is that what it is? I don't think so. Let's look at Sweden. Sweden, right? What do you think when you think of Sweden? Blonde hair and blue eyes, well-toned. Everybody skis in the winter and still somehow has a nice tan. They did a comprehensive study of rape and attempted rape convictions for 24 years, between 2000 and 2024. 63% of the accused were immigrants, or they were either foreign-born or children of foreign-born parents from Muslim nations. 63%. That's pretty big. And if you get on, I know social media is not the place necessarily to go, but there's legitimate news sources out there. If you look around, you're going to see some news stories on, these women who are now like legitimately afraid to walk the streets of their own country, their own homes, their own cities, for fear of being accosted. The biggest commonality with that 63% it was obviously males who came to the country as already teenagers or young adults. And that was after all the variables too. That was accounting, for income, drug abuse or substance abuse, mental health problems, prior criminal records, all that stuff. The disparities are all still there. 63% of rapes and violent crimes, or attempted rapes. Denmark. What do you think when you think of Denmark? Vikings. That's what I think about. Vikings. And I knew a couple of guys from military dudes, special operators from Denmark. They were very, very Viking-like. Yeah. Not a lot of contrast, right? But a little bit. Denmark tightened up on their asylum policies, and it kind of tightened the influx from these majority Muslim countries. So their numbers are a little different. But even so, the conviction rates for Muslims in Denmark's 3 times higher than the natives. Yeah, 3 times higher. And look, these are police records. These are like official court documents and stuff. These aren't opinion pieces or anything that I'm getting these numbers from. These are official police and law enforcement stats. Now, oddly enough, side note here, that and in the U.S., the FBI is the prime resource for statistics when it comes to crime and stuff like that. And my question is, based on what's going on in Europe and what has been going on in Europe, my question is, why do we keep stats on, all right, again, I'm doing air fingers quotes, hate crimes against specific groups or religious groups, but not stats on specific groups or religious groups that are committing crimes? Of course, with the exception, unless it's a white domestic terrorist group, and then there's big stats on that. But if a Muslim origin or a group of or just Islam is a group, folks. It's a religious organization. It's an arguably extremist. Why don't we keep stats on that? Why do we try to make the criminals anonymous in the system, our system, and avoid? That takes away our tools to establish any analytical data and to be able to see patterns. Now, some of it's just unwritten and understood. Well, we know this is bad, or we know this is blah, blah, blah. But why don't we keep those stats? Is it racist to keep those stats? We keep racial stats on blacks and whites and Hispanics and non-Hispanics. Again, Islam is not a race. Muslim is not a race. It's a religion. But it's a heavy-handed religion. So the vast majority of people coming from those countries are in fact Muslim. Now look, before I go any further, if you're a friend of mine and you're a Muslim, stand by, listen to the whole thing. All right, I am bashing Islam a little bit, but I'll stand by what I'm saying here. Why should America pay attention to Europe? Well, again, I said, the lefties love to make direct comparisons when it comes to health care or welfare, but they don't want to make the direct comparisons when it comes to Muslim rape gangs and whatnot. But we're going to slowly see it because we have a massive influx of. Now, obviously, in America, the biggest influx of immigration comes from the South, right? Mexico, South America. I'll get to that. But we have a significant amount of Muslim population in America. I don't know, 2 or 3% anyway. And they come here for whatever reason, asylum, various whatever programs or just illegal. There's plenty of illegals too. Everybody thinks illegal border crossings, they think of Mexico, but don't think they're not coming in through Canada, folks. Don't think that the Islamists aren't creeping in through the northern border. They are, because Canada loves them. Now, of course, America's a big place with big numbers, 360 or so million. Obviously, native-born Americans, if you look at raw numbers, commit more crime, but percentage-wise, they still pull a heavier numbers than heavier crime numbers than the population numbers bear out. European experience here, we're watching it right in real time. We see what's happening, and again, large numbers of young Muslim men, they get in here somehow without any rigorous vetting. I'm going to say now our immigration policies are all jacked up, and I'll hit that again later. There are no expectations of assimilation, if only on the surface level, maybe, but there are no expectations really of assimilation, or no demands or no accountability or anything like that. And these values and these problems, this criminal activity, and mostly, look, I'm going to say it's largely around sexual assault and things like that, but that don't go away with the second generation, right? Just because you were born here don't mean you hold the values that are here, that are meant that the country holds. Because assimilation is not an expectation or requirement for some reason. And again, when I say assimilation, I don't mean you have to erase your identity. But there has to be some level of acceptance of our laws and stuff like that. So if we keep our policies going the way they are, with the catch and release, or whatever, these mass sort of parole things where they let dudes go with a court date that never show up, or this sort of chain migration where groups will coagulate in one space and kind of take over a space. If that stuff goes unchecked, yeah, American communities are going to start looking like communities in Germany and Sweden at least within the next 10 years, I'd say. But over 20 years, and I'll get to the problem. Sorry, I'll get to it. Do we want to look like that? We don't. I can tell you now, I remember Munich in 1990, 91. It was so clean and it was pristine, and it was just awesome and historic and all that. I was there in 2019, and man, the outskirts were still nice, but it looked like it was a shithole, man. It was disheartening for sure. American cities have a hard enough time, right? We don't need to bring in opposing values that are also have no stake or no intention of keeping the city healthy and clean and peaceful, and etc. So Europe is showing us the early signs, and they're obvious. The stats and the law enforcement data, they bear it out. They show it. They show us what to look for when you have concentrations of these Northern African, Middle Eastern sort of subgroups. The data's there. All right. Well, why bother? Why do they hate America so bad, but then want to come here? Well, there's a few reasons, I'm sure. Now, look, on the extreme end of that, it's going to be sort of a slow, progressive takeover, correct? That's the extreme end, which is what you see. All right, and I'm going to point out England. Now, I didn't use any stats from England, and I should have. That would have made my point probably a lot stronger. But literally in England, and probably like Leeds, maybe Manchester, yes, that's it. They're non-white, non-English, and there's problems if you go there as a white Englishman. So why do they come to America? Okay, the extreme end is takeover. The non-extreme end, the more practical, reasonable answer is because America's a great country, and we have it's the land of opportunity, or it has been, right? And we also have a pretty lax welfare system. Well, and some people might say, "Oh, we're importing." They're importing voters and importing people for our own ends. Well, what are those ends? Well, in the 1960s, there were two professors. I want to say they were both professors, Cloward-Piven. They outlined. They had a theory, and they outlined and advocated. They advocated that these actions to deliberately overwhelm our social services in order to create sort of an epic crisis that would crumble under the weight, and then force all these massive government expansions and forced programs such as universal national income and completely nationalized health care and that kind of thing. That was an activist sort of thing that they pushed, and it's out, and the left grabbed hold of it. And that's the whole theory. Overwhelm the system until it breaks so that we can then justify massive government expansion without acknowledging the fact that it's the government the government expansion is what's crumbling the system. But they want it to seem like they want to blame everything on sort of, well, Republican form of government, right? They don't, democracy, and then capitalism evil, capitalism bad. But it's the government programs that create these sort of overflows and these overwhelming conditions. Never mind all the corruption that goes along with government programs and all political pockets that get lined. So that's what I see. I see they come here because we do have a welfare system that's loose. And in today's immigration context, but either legal or illegal, they're able to participate in these programs like Medicaid and food, like SNAP, and support for housing and benefits that they get through having kids in it on American soil, which is, distastefully kind of referred to as anchor babies, right? Now, it's distasteful, and I say anchor babies. I remember seeing a headline just 2 months ago that Barron Trump was an anchor baby for Melania. So the knife has two edges on it, folks. When you're throwing mud around. So yeah, both legal and illegals are taking part in all this various welfare and common good that the liberals love so much. And the cost of that is up in the hundreds of billions. Hundreds of billions of dollars it costs. So what does that do? It strains the budget, right? Well, one, we know Congress can't even put together a budget, but that's just added strain onto it. That just, oh, well, we just got more taxes, right? And it consumes the resources that are meant for citizens. And understand this, folks, when I say citizens, that includes immigrants who have legally obtained citizenship in America. This is in no way a bigoted, racist rant. We have to know who's here, why they're here, and account for them in some way. We have to. Otherwise, chaos ensues. And so as it is right now, it's setting the exact conditions to apply sort of systemic pressure on the welfare system that Cloward-Piven laid out in their little manifesto or their theory. Massive government-controlled programs to manage the overload. Look it up, Cloward-Piven doctrine or Cloward-Piven theory. So Europe shows us the cause and effect, folks. So in America, even the right or the center right, and even the socialist, democratic, whatever you want to call them, are beginning to get on board with big government. And these parties in Germany and Sweden and Denmark, what are they doing? Well, they're responding now, too little too late, but they're responding with extremely tough border and deportation policies. And some people say that these are too stringent. Well, I got news for you. This was an easily predictable overcorrection to a problem that got ignored for about 2 decades. If you ignore a problem, it doesn't go away. It doesn't autocorrect. So as you see patterns emerge, address those patterns subtly to guide those outcomes. But like I said, in America, we don't even have, our law enforcement system isn't even keeping up with these specific groups. Like I said, other than white domestic extremists, they're not keeping up. So it's hard to develop. It's hard to see these patterns as they emerge. And then when you say, well, it's Muslim extremists and Sharia law, et cetera, and then, oh, you're just a bigot. Well, show me the patterns. They're there. We're just not tracking them. Well, in Europe, yeah, like I said, it was easily predictable. And now they're having to overcorrect. And the overcorrection, though maybe needed, is never good. And it's not easy. It's tough. It's too extreme all at once. And what are those overcorrections? What do they look like? Well, like vastly expanded, like law enforcement power, unwarranted surveillance. And then you got this citizens first, Americans first sort of welfare rules that looks on the surface to be, racist and xenophobic. And these overcorrections may actually discriminate against immigrant citizens because the existing framework, you chose not to keep up with the patterns. And therefore, Cloward-Piven theory comes in. Oh, well, you failed this. This failed completely. Now we need more government. The system that failed us needs to be doubled so that it can fail us even more. And even in America, the same thing I just said. Even in America, you got alleged conservatives, center right, and who are looking at statist style solutions to problems. Now we know the left already embraces statism, but now the right, I've heard somebody say that America is shifting more right, and that's just not the case at all. And they're doing that based on social media and based on what you see on TV, but they're not looking at the real policies as they play out and the effects of the policies. And yes, even conservatives are now embracing these statist solutions to problems. Bigger government, more federal agencies, protectionist economic policies, more and more and more social spending in order to pander, for public support, bigger government. You know what? The Republicans love surveillance. Yeah, they love unwarranted surveillance. That's statism. We don't need it. We don't want it. It's bad. Once it takes a foothold, it will never go away. And I always talk about Orwell. That's what's up. That's what's coming. And that's what overreactions look like to unaddressed problems. Yeah, that's what overreactions look like. We don't want it. Now, all this ain't completely about ideology. What I'm trying to get to, I will get to, is sort of more pragmatic solutions to help correct this overloaded system, as opposed to these knee-jerk overreactions. But the big problem in the current paradigm is that the more extreme the problem, the more extreme the overcorrection. We got to get out of that. We got to get out of that knee-jerk. We let a problem fester for a while. We put it on the back burner, let it, and next thing you know, the pot's boiled hard. Everything's boiled away, and it's just, and now it's a pot that's caked with black charcoal in it. We can't, and now we got to clean that out. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I said it's not all about ideology, and it's not. However, in the context of what we're talking about today, and the immigration and the group that I'm referring to, which is Muslim majority countries immigrating to America, there is a profound difference in value systems. In Muslim majority countries and in Muslim communities in America, surveys consistently show a significant support for Sharia law within their communities. Yeah, and that includes corporal punishment, folks, and honor killings and punishing apostasy and blasphemy against Muhammad. And some of those, when I say significant support, I mean we're looking at 77% plus approval ratings within these communities. That cannot happen in America, good people. And the weirdness and the irony of it all is that American leftists who vehemently support, the Muslim influx they don't understand, I guess, or they don't care that by default they're supporting theocracy. They're supporting rule by religious extremists. And they don't see that as a true threat, but they would rather be against our founding form of governance via the Constitution that expressly supports freedom of religion, which I supported. But the leftists love to say freedom from religion when they're arguing against Christians. But then we're talking about Islam, and they don't have consistent metrics for evaluation there. Well, lately I don't think Christianity's been that violent, as of the past century, you know what I'm saying, or so. Well, freedom from religion, good people, that don't resonate with Sharia law at all. You have no freedom from religion in Muslim nations. And then speaking of irony from the left, what about women's rights in this? What about that? What about the very, very real physical threats that these women face on a daily basis? What about, just tolerating honor killings in America, or somebody getting lashes with a cane or whip or something, or getting a woman being stoned to death? What about forced marriages, arranged marriages? In extreme cases, folks, there are extreme cases in some of these countries where they do clitoris mutilation, where they snip the clitoris off so that a woman can feel no pleasure. What about that? How does that jive with your leftist ideology? Do you think that all that's going to change once they move to America? You think they're going to be so overwhelmed with freedom? Now, look, there are people that come to America. We'll get to it. What about all that, man? God, what about it? Look, coming out of Europe, looking back at Europe, right? All these police reports and all this stuff, painfully obvious links to elevated crime around sex and rape culture. And this is not news, folks. I'm not breaking any controversial news here. I'm just pointing out why the inconsistency. Why are you overlooking that? Well, it's in small cases. No, it's not. In Europe, in Sweden specifically, in England, Great Britain, UK, whatever you want to call it, they got grooming gangs, or even just rape, individual stranger rapes, right? Just some dude follows you down the road that is imported from this Muslim culture that, look, Islam don't even recognize or understand mutual consent. Not from a woman, not from a child, for sure. Well, you can't. Children really technically can't even consent, but that's not a thing. Consent is not a thing. Among two grown men who are negotiating a deal, yeah, maybe. But beyond that, no. And this is also a culture. Good people. If you think it's not, you need to do a little more research. That the abuse of young boys and this sort of forced twist of gender roles so that grown men can get some sexual pleasure and satisfaction and have fun and have boys dancing for them and then raping them. That exists. It's out there. Now, good people, listen to me. I'm not just bashing Islam. Rape, violence, all of that exists in America. Authority figures take advantage of young people all the time. I point you to the whole pandemic of or epidemic of Catholic priests that we went through for a while there. And who knows, probably still going on. I don't know. It exists, but there's no need to import it. We got enough problems, right? Let's solve the Catholic priests banging choir boys first. Let's solve gym coaches banging their athletes. Let's solve, and I know it's crazy, but there's this crazy little breakout of female teachers having sex with their students who, there's always those dudes on the football team who look like they're 23, hung like a horse, fit, already got a full beard, and they're 17 years old. And you got these 23, 24-year-old teachers who they talk a little junk to them, and boom, there they are, getting it in the closet in the school. Crazy shit's going on in America. We don't need to import any more of it. And the difference is the people doing it in America know it's criminal. They know it's wrong. They're just trying to get away with it. Whereas the Muslim culture, it is not wrong, or they don't think it's wrong. Primary difference with American culture and then the Islam culture is the size and scope of those practices, and then the cultural acceptance of them. Even if it's just quiet acceptance, it's still acceptance. Whereas in America, we know what's criminal, because our value system is different. It's built differently. It recognizes individual liberty and autonomy. Islam does not. And what about taqiyya, right? I'm going to say this and it might be a little trivial to you, but taqiyya is an ordained sort of permission in order to lie. And originally that was in order to conceal your faith under persecution. But in modern practice, it's it's used as strategic deception when Muslims are dealing with anyone who's non-Muslim, be it individual, institution, media, government, whatever. It's okay. It's okay to lie, to conceal your intent. And that might seem trivial and small, but it's not. Now, we're going to break it down just a wee bit more. And look, you guys I welcome your feedback. All right, that's all I can say. Moderates and zealots. What is a moderate versus a zealot when it comes to Islam? Well, these public sort of proclamations of being moderate, when you'll see an extremist sort of imam get up on TV and talk about that they're moderate, blah blah blah. I reject violence, or I reject whatever. But that contradicts what goes on, and it contradicts the private polling that we saw earlier on things like Sharia or Bakabazi. Yeah, anybody know about Bakabazi? Look it up. BACHABAZI. I'm not going to go into it. Look it up. Is that moderate? Are those things? Is Sharia moderate? So that poses a legitimate question about whether they're sincere or not, right? Or whether they're using taqiyya. Now, I've said this for years, and I believe it. There is no such thing as a moderate Muslim. They are either devout and want you dead, or subjected, or they are essentially non-practicing and just want to live life. If you are a practicing devout Muslim, that's a violent, some people have called it a death culture. I'm calling it a rape culture. Or you're essentially a non-practicing, non-devout Muslim, and you're just living life and, using the non-aggression principle in your life and trying to assimilate to the culture around you, the American culture, or whatever country you're in. And look, to all my Muslim friends listening, listen to me. I'm always open for debate, number one. But chances are most of my Muslim friends are a little bit of backsliders, you know what I mean? None of my friends, I don't think, believe that they should cut the head off of a believer. I don't think any of my friends believe if their daughter was dating a white guy or a black guy, American non-Muslim, that she should be killed. I don't think any of my friends, have sex with young boys. So again, if you're one of my homies who's Muslim, tune me up. Let me know what you think about what I'm saying. And none of this, folks, is to say every Muslim immigrant is a murderous, raping savage. Very many good Muslim people out there that integrate. They achieve some level of success. They contribute positively to the American tapestry. They are a piece of the spice of American culture. I know and love a few of them who do exactly that. And so that's who I'm reaching out to right now to say, hey, look, tune me up if you think I need it. All right, so I'm not throwing that big blanket, folks. I'm talking about a specific culture that is angry. I would say, generally speaking, unhappy. I would say has a lot of, self-imposed angst, and believes that they can do whatever they want in the name of that angst, in the name of Muhammad. So the same as with episode 55, right, on gun violence. We have to honestly identify a problem before we can solve the problem. The data, the group level sort of data, the demographics, the way they break down in Europe and their ongoing sort of lived experience painfully highlights that these cultural incompatibilities will not resolve themselves automatically at scale, at a large scale or small scale for that matter. They're not going to fix themselves. If you're a 50-year-old man and you think it's okay to have sex with a 12-year-old boy at the age, you're not going to change your mind about that. If your daughter wears short shorts to the beach and you think it's okay to murder her because of that dishonor, and you're not going to change your mind on that. What's going to make it right? Well, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and be very controversial and say you need to find Jesus. He can make that right. But other than that, you're not going to change your mind on it. We're not Americans. We are not going to change their belief system, their value system. It's too ingrained. Individually, yeah, one at a time. And you might win some people over, but I'm talking about the culture, folks. That if you go up into the middle of a Muslim community and start denouncing, honor killings or child rape or just anything Western or Islamic in nature, chances are you'll get violence done to you immediately. So the problem ain't going to fix itself. You have to identify what the problem is. The U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress shall have the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. A uniform, that's it. That's what the Constitution says about immigration. Well, they have not done that. Congress has not established a uniform rule of naturalization. It's got holes in it. It doesn't hold up. If the U.S. maintains course in this loose, open-door immigration, now, yeah, you can say, well, what about Trump? He's been hard on immigrants. Well, I still think to date, Barack Obama deported more immigrants than Trump did so far. But so at any rate, we still largely have a very open-door immigration approach. If we don't get some meaningful restructuring going on with that, well, the risk is that we're going to just continue to import sort of deeper cultural levels of violence. And there's definitely going to be an economic strain on our welfare systems. And eventually there's going to start to develop a more distinct us against them social sort of mistrust or distrust. And then a cultural clash that goes along with that. And then there's going to be the pressure for bigger, more intrusive government programs to fix it. And good people, we do not want that. We do not want bigger, more government. The chasm between Western values, well, which are what? Individual liberty, right? Basically. And Islamic sort of Sharia-oriented values, it makes integration difficult. Far more difficult than with Mexican or South American immigrant waves that have come in the past. Because regardless, yes, that kind of overwhelms the system, but there's not as big of a culture clash in that we share the same fundamental value system with those people. Yes, cartels aside, right? Never mind the criminal element. We have the same basic foundations of sort of Christian ethics and values with most of the people coming from Mexico and South America. Now, some of those people are godless. Some of them are criminals. True enough, and I think we should be more stringent on them. I'm not saying give Mexico and South America a free pass. I'm saying it's a different kind of dynamic that bears looking at. It bears tracking, and it bears looking at. Europe is running the experiment, folks. They've run it. We don't need to repeat it, right? We need to look at the hard lessons learned from Europe, catch up to where we are now, and start implementing pragmatic, functional solutions that will be relatively painless. If we do them early, right, they'll be relatively painless. Before, 10 or 15 years has passed, and now we have this enormous massive, expensive, and potentially unethical overcorrection. We can avoid it. We don't have to get to that point. Well, Edgar, I'm talking a lot of hating on the Muslims, talking about what we shouldn't do. All right. Well, what can we do? I'm always down to try to offer some kind of solution as practical as possible. I'm sure that we can come up with some solutions that still honor American autonomy and still keeps legal immigration alive and thriving, folks. We need to keep legal immigration alive and thriving. But look, we can secure borders. Disregard all the hyperbole around that. If we have secure physical barriers and technology, and if we apply consistent and ethical policy and law enforcement to it, and a key component being ethical. Yeah, that's something we need to do. Again, disregard the hyperbole around secure borders. No country on the planet doesn't have them. We can end this sort of catch and release system and be more stringent on our asylum seekers. And as far as, my husband beats me is not asylum. Asylum is a very specific definition from very specific war-torn countries, and it gets abused. Deport illegal criminals for sure, 100%, and visa overstayers, right? Without prejudice. Don't try to apply DEI to the immigration system. Be consistent across the board. If a German overstays their visa, send them on. If a Englishman overstays his visa, send him on. If a Syrian overstays his visa, oh, well, we can put him up in a hotel. We can blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. That's just simple, basic accountability. That's not controversial. We can shift our illegal immigration system or develop it up to be more merit-based. It has been this in the past, and it can be again. That focuses on skills, that has some component of English language proficiency. It don't have to be stringent, but they should be able to function in basic conversation in America. Some kind of demonstrated knowledge of American civics. I think there's a test, right, that demonstrates a basic knowledge. Well, let's apply that impartially and consistently. Or call me crazy, but even a demonstrated commitment to American values. Well, that's subjective, man. What are American values? It's a mixing pot, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, how do they demonstrate that? Well, how about adherence to established immigration laws and procedures? Yeah, just simply obeying the immigration laws and doing the paperwork and going through the correct procedures. That's a demonstration right there. Doesn't have to be crazy. You don't have to show up with your MAGA hat on and your American t-shirt or your 2A sticker on your truck. Yeah. Just adhere to law and procedures. Now, are they weak? Yeah. Do they need to be tuned up? Yeah. But, and we must, and this is a must, absolutely reject and condemn theocracies, would-be theocracies, tyrant imams out there preaching vile hate. Well, First Amendment, they got a First Amendment. That's true. But I believe everybody tried to hem up Donald Trump for inciting violence during the January 6th thing, right? Well, are imams not held to that same standard? And there must absolutely not ever, never be anything remotely resembling a Sharia zone on U.S. soil. Absolutely not. Not even remotely. Not even if you're a Muslim cop in America and you try to impose some other kind of Sharia law or recognize Sharia law in your performance of your duties, nope, you're fired. You're out of here. That's it. That's an absolute. We must. These are fixes. I'm telling you what fixes are, and you can argue with me all you want, and I will argue with you about them. We have to require, absolutely without question, full equality for women on our soil, and strictly enforce our own existing laws against sexual abuse and domestic abuse and false imprisonment and all those things. All that are contradictory to Muslim, ways. We must reserve access to welfare systems to citizens only. And again, I say, that includes immigrant citizens who are here legally, who have done all the correct things to be here. There are already laws on the books about welfare fraud. American citizens have to come first. That don't mean white citizens or black citizens and non-Muslim. That means American citizens all have to come ahead of non-citizens. If you erase what makes being a citizen relevant or what makes it beneficial to be a citizen, then what's the point? There are no protections at that point. Folks, we can and should, by the way, keep the door open for the world. Anyone in the world who genuinely wishes to become an American and add value to our culture, but never, ever, ever at the expense of our own safety or our economy or our cultural roots, our cultural foundations. So that's what I think we can do to fix some things immigration-wise. Now look, the European data speaks out loud, and it foretells the future of the U.S. if we don't take note of it. And good people, listen to this. National sovereignty and self-preservation are not radical, controversial ideas. They aren't bigoted. They aren't racist. They aren't xenophobic. They aren't nationalist. And they're not even illiberal. Sovereignty and self-preservation are the basic needs or the foundation of any successful nation across the planet. That's what I have for you to do, good people. I'm always open for debate. I enjoy it. I am not Muslim bashing, even though it sounds like it. Again, if you're one of my very good Muslim homies, please tune me up if you think I need it. And again, I am a libertarian, but I do not believe in open borders. We have to have some form of order. There has to be some manageable numbers. Our political system depends on the number of citizens that we have in America. We have to know that. And yeah, I don't think the census should count illegals in regards to electoral votes. Why would we? If you're not a citizen, you can come and go, and you're going to come up to America, get an apartment, vote, and then go back to your home country for 11 months, and then or 23 months, and then come back during midterms and vote again, and then go away and then come back for general elections and vote again. Do you see? I mean, that's a simplistic example, but I mean, do you see that? We have to have some kind of, if you're a businessman, think about, I don't know. I know this sounds crazy, but inventory control. You need to know what's coming and going. If you're a financial person, you got to know how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. There's a lot of things, folks, a lot of things going on with what I've just talked about. And I hit the surface level. There is a cultural divide. There is a cultural divide with Islam and the rest of the world. So be mindful of that. All right. Man, that's enough. Good people, hit me up if you want. If you got questions, comments, if you want to bash on me a little bit, call me names. Other than that, please check out OspreyShootingSolutions.com. We have a whole bunch of stuff in June. Namely, number 1, June 6th is the OSS Challenge, OSS to Green Beret Edition, sponsored by Athena Target Solutions and in support of Special Forces Foundation. That's a big one. I want to fill that up. So please sign up for it. It's on OspreyShootingSolutions.com. Please check out twoteamguys.com. Please check out the podcast website, which is thejuntopodcast.com. And of course, please go, if you have the means and the will, please go to givesendgo.com/help-a-homie fund to help us in our charitable efforts to help, people around town. If they need shoes on their feet or diapers on their babies or a meal in their belly, that's the level we're at right now. So please consider giving to that. I look in the future to make that a nonprofit, a large organization, and where we can have a broader range and do a little bit more for people. And of course, being a standalone organization may be difficult, and I'm looking to try and partner up with existing organizations or churches in the area or something like that. So it's still very fluid, and I'm still trying to work that out. At any rate, right now, it's simply me distributing help and resources on an individual level where I see the need. Okay. Thanks very much for listening, good people. I appreciate each and every one of you. And and if I missed it last time, but happy Mother's Day, belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. You are often underappreciated and overworked. So happy Mother's Day. All right, good people. Be safe. I love you guys.